who are visiting with us this morning, I'm the pastor at the church here, but I followed that guy. And we're from Buffalo and Rochester, New York, so there's been this rivalry for many, many years around the church. Listen, if you're from Buffalo, New York, we don't have much. You know, there's not much to celebrate. It's been 20 years of just bad football. But apparently it's 1994, and the team isn't so bad, and so I compromised. I wore my well, it wasn't even my shirt. I don't even have a Steelers shirt. If I had to borrow it from Chris. I had a Penguin shirt. What? Yeah. I've been disowned, but I think half of our family will be at the game tonight. And since they moved the game, I have like 8 hours to preach, so it's going to be great. This morning we are in our Advent series. We've been calling it a Hallmark Christmas. How many of you have been watching Hallmark movies like all season long? Come on. I don't know if you saw my Facebook update yesterday, but I'm so dumb. I'm watching it wasn't even Hallmark. I think it was like a Lifetime movie, which maybe aren't quite as fluffy. I don't know. But I'm watching this movie, and all of a sudden I hear this beeping. Well, Max, our son, had been making like chicken nuggets in the oven, and I was like, the kid didn't turn off the oven. I'm running around the house trying to figure out where the beeping is coming from, only to find out it was coming from the movie. Because as soon as I press play again, I'm hearing the beeping again. I'm like, oh, the guy in the movies is making cookies. What? Is it in there? Oh, okay. I'm like, I don't even see where it's going. All right. Well, so we're in our third week of Advent, and we're going to talk about joy. And isn't that one of the things that we like about Hallmark movies? Is because there's an abundance of joy and love and hope, and we dream. I know that it's real. All of us have Hallmark Christmas like lives. We all live lives where we skip through, life, and we ice skate, and there's carolers in the square, and there's, sleigh rides. Isn't that how life is? Oh, wait, no, we all live in reality. Well, you guys live in a Hallmark movie. They did a sleigh ride last week, whatever. But for some of us, we come to this time of the year and maybe life has been hard. Because that's reality, isn't it? Sometimes life is hard. And sometimes it is hard to find joy at this time of year. Last Sunday night, we had our annual Blue Christmas service, which talks about how do we find hope in the middle of things that are tough. And some of you are in seasons where things are going great, and some of you are in seasons where things have been really hard. And we hope that today you'll find a little bit of joy, a little bit of hope, a little bit of love. Next week, we're going to talk about peace. That's hard to come by these days, isn't it? In our homes, in our work, in the world, life seems messy and crazy. And so we hope we find a little bit of joy. We had a very joyous occasion happen at our home on Friday. Alexa is a licensed driver. Then my mom said, I don't know, should you be letting her drive? It's really busy out there. It's Christmas. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like, you got your license. Too bad you can't drive. Sorry. Like, I don't know. But the first thing she did when she got her license was go to Walmart and get me toilet paper. So I've experienced a brand new freedom in my life. And then I was like, go pick up your brother for me. So I'm no longer the only taxi driver in the house. Yay. But so that was a joyous occasion. Some of you are like me, and those of you who know me know this about me, and that is that I struggle to find joy. That's just an honest confession. It's nice if the pastor gets up and pretends they have it all together. I'm not that pastor. I don't have it all together, and there are moments when I struggle to find joy. It is easier for me to find what's wrong with what's going on in life. And maybe some of you have life experiences like this where you're like me, but you live with people who find joy. It's annoying. Miss Alexa over here is always trying to find the joy. We're going to miss her when she leaves us next year. I know. It's very hard for me. Go, Roberts. Yeah, she's been accepted to many schools. She has not decided. Don't ask her. But she always finds the joy. She's such a, I learn much from her. I haven't learned how to do this yet, but I remember one time traveling with her, and I was grumpy, and it was taking forever to get there. We were trying to get to mine, some pastor's retreat, and we were all jammed in my parents' car, 6 of us, and we had to stop we finally stopped for lunch, and now I'm annoyed and hungry, so I'm just hangry, and we're standing in line at Wendy's, which is really maybe not the best choice anyway, and I'm just annoyed, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe we're in this stupid line. It's ridiculous. And Alexa goes, someday we're going to laugh about this, so I'm just going to laugh now. So I have people that surround me that help me find joy sometimes. But for many of us, we struggle. How do we find joy? How do we find an attitude of joy? We have been taught that joy is circumstantial, that we should only have joy when things are going well. But Jesus wants something different for us. And let me just give one disclaimer, though, okay? Sometimes we come to church, and the pastor will preach on joy or peace or one of these things and say, here's the 3 things you can do to find joy, and it will all be better. But I want to say, if you struggle with depression or anxiety, things like that, me giving you 1, 2, 3 is not going to solve that, okay? So I don't want anyone to ever leave thinking, there must be something wrong with me because I can't do 1, 2, 3 and make it all better. If you're somebody that struggles with that, we encourage you to find help from someone that can really help you. Is Jesus part of that equation? Yes. We believe that. But I also don't want to be, to minimize something and make it sound like, if we can just put a Band-Aid on something like that. We can't. That requires more help. But for the rest of us who maybe don't struggle as much with that, some of us just choose to be miserable. Right? I do it, and I'm like, because I concentrate on what's wrong. Let's see what we can do to find some joy in this season. Allison, I'm going to start maybe a slide or 2 in with verse. I think I might need reading glasses. Where's Ryan? Verse 8 of Luke 2. Did you know he's looking for you? He's fine. Okay. Jesus has been born, and this is a story about some shepherds. Luke 2, verse 8. There were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I give you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly hosts appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. On the 8th day, when it came time to circumcise the child, he was named Jesus, the name the angel had given him before he was conceived. So I want you to picture yourself as a shepherd. In the New Testament, the shepherds were kind of outcasts. They were just people that tended sheep, and they had to stay in a certain area because if you brought sheep into the vicinity of Jerusalem or Bethlehem, then that sheep became a sacrifice. So their job was to keep the sheep for sacrifice for when it's actually supposed to happen, and they kept them outside of town. They were kind of considered second-class citizens, and they're just minding their own business. It's night. It appears to be nighttime, and so the sheep would have been like in some kind of enclosed area where they would have all gathered at night. And they're hanging around, and all of a sudden an angel shows up. And I could tell a really long message today about shepherds and what they mean and all that. I am aware of the time, don't worry. So I won't go into all of it. But one of the main things we can learn from the shepherds is that God chose to bring his message to these men first. He chose to come to ordinary people. People thought that this long-awaited Messiah was going to come to a palace with a big announcement. Like you guys pay attention when royal babies are born in England, and there's all these people at the hospital, and the guy comes out with the outfit and the trumpet, and there's an announcement on the board, and it's a big deal. And did you know that guy's not even like from the royal, like he's not even an official anything. He just does it, and they kind of just let him do it. But people were expecting there was going to be this big announcement when the Messiah showed up. Because if you remember, the prophets told us about the Messiah for many, 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 many years. And then between the Old and New Testaments, there's 400 years of silence. We think we have to wait on God sometimes. They waited 400 years. 400 years, they're waiting for this Messiah, so they're expecting this big hoopla, this big announcement, a big parade, something. And instead, an angel shows up to a bunch of shepherds. Why did they get the message first? So let's talk a little bit about joy and what these shepherds heard and what they did with the news when they got it. First, let's talk about what is joy. I think that we tend to define joy the way the world does. And the world says joy is dependent on your circumstances. Right? I'm happy today because I don't have to play taxi anymore. I'm happy today because my relationship's going great. I'm happy today because my job is going great. Whatever, fill in the blank, right? As long as those circumstances around me, I will have happiness or joy. That's what the world says. We say that joy is found in pleasure or position or wealth. Do you ever know wealthy people who are miserable? A lot of us have, maybe not wealth the way the world says, but we have enough. And yet we still don't find happiness or joy. Worldly joy is fickle or temporary. It's based on what we're feeling. Right? And I get caught up in this. Things around me are going really bad, so I'm sad. And sadness is part of life. But what God is saying is that we should have joy that comes from God being enough. Is God enough for us? When I was growing up, my parents, you guys have been here more often. So when you make my sermons, it's, I don't know, maybe not as funny, but they're here. This was the motto in our house. And when you're like me, it's kind of annoying. Attitude is a choice. Well, I'm a teenager and I'm just going to choose to have an attitude, right? Some of you are raising teenagers or had teenagers. Now, our kids aren't horribly dramatic. We have 2 teenagers in the house, and they're not horribly dramatic or, up and down, but we do get the attitude once in a while that is accompanied by the huff. Do you guys have the... And so my whole life, I grew up hearing, attitude is a choice. You can't choose what happens to you, but you can choose how to respond to it. And often I choose to just be miserable because I just want to be mad. But joy is an attitude of the heart. This type of joy comes from God and God alone. It is something that is filled, our life is filled only with that. We have a spot in our lives that can only be filled by God. And that is what joy should be coming out of. It shouldn't have to do with what's going on in our lives at a particular time or an emotion that we're feeling. We aren't always going to feel the emotion of happiness. Some of us more than others. So pursuing happiness is a good thing, but pursuing God for real joy, that's more lasting. That's saying I can be joyous. It even says in James that we should be happy through trials. I have to learn that one better. Right? But that we can still be in the middle of the struggle, in the middle of the brokenness, in the middle of the mess. We can still find joy because God just fills us up with it. So we look at this occasion where the shepherds are standing in a field and this angel shows up and says, I'm bringing you great tidings and you're supposed to have joy. And here's the announcement of this Messiah. Why was this an occasion for joy? I told you earlier that it is because it is a fulfillment of great hope. The shepherds would have heard about this Messiah that was supposed to show up. Maybe they didn't spend all day waiting around for it, but they probably knew about it. They knew that this baby being born was likely the fulfillment of great hope. We have the first promise of this Messiah in Genesis 3. That's how long they've been waiting. And now the nation of Israel has waited a long time for this promise to come, and now here it is. Through this gift, they will be delivered from evil and have victory over death. This is the greatest news we will ever hear. We may have nothing else. Everything else might be crumbling around us. But we still have a Messiah, a Savior that came to fix our mess. We still have a God who loves us so much that he comes to ordinary people, messed up, broken people like me, and say, you know what, get out of your miserable self and you can find joy because I am enough. So how do we find this lasting joy? What do the shepherds do? What can we learn from them? And again, I know that this is not like just do 1, 2, 3 and you're going to skip out of here with joy. I understand. Sometimes this is part of our faith journey, part of our walk with God, is learning contentment in him alone. But here are some things that we can do to have lasting joy. First, don't allow fear to stifle our joy. What is the first thing that happens when the angel shows up? The shepherds are terrified. Now, I don't know about you. I mean, I know we're supposed to see angels as like fluffy things and clouds and playing harps, but if you're like sitting around in a field one day and some angel shows up, I might be scared too. That's weird. I mean, I don't know about you, but this has never happened to me. But doesn't it seem like every angel encounter we see in the Bible, it's like, don't be afraid. The angel says, don't be afraid. Some of us, and I can tell you in my own personal life, that my first reaction is fear to things. I struggle with allowing fear to kind of control my life. And it's something that God is working on me, has worked in me, is still working on me, to not allow fear to be my first reaction to things. Now, should we have reverence and awe for God? Yes. You know, some fear is healthy. If you do that, you're going to really have a bad consequence, right? So sometimes fear stops us from being stupid. But some of us allow fear to stop us from doing what God has called us to. And over the years, God has called me to things, and often my first response will be like, That is way too scary. I get paralyzed by it. And I don't have all the answers to get rid of fear, but one thing that we can do is just trust that God, when he calls us to something, he's going to help us do it. That is hard for me. I remember one time somebody said to me, Collene, you're always thinking of the worst case scenario. And it's true. Now, some of it is because when you are kind of like in a role where you're in charge of things, you're constantly thinking, okay, if this happens, then I need to do this. And so being in charge is sometimes hard for me. I'll never forget, I became senior pastor here 2.5 years ago. And I remember the first moment it hit me, I am in charge of this whole thing. Now, I don't mean that in like a power thing, but just like this decision's up to me. And it was over something stupid. The teenagers had gone to Kennywood. The shuttle breaks down on the side of the road. Pastor Emily's away preaching, so everyone's calling me. And it's at midnight. It's midnight on a Saturday. I have to preach the next morning. And I'm on the phone, and I'm on the phone with Val. And I'm thinking to myself, why are people calling me about this? Like, what do they think I'm going to do? And then it hits me, well, you are the senior pastor, so this is your problem, right? And I was like, oh, it's never going to be the same again. I can't call my daddy and say, go rescue the teenagers on the side of the road. It's going to be you that's rescuing the teenagers on the side of the road. And I'm getting Dirk out of bed, and we're driving to the city. What? Oh, and now someone's car is being broken into, so that's great. Joy. So I do sometimes think of the worst case scenario just because of my position, but sometimes it like stifles me. And God is saying, Collene, you need to learn to just trust that when I call you to something, I can help you through it. And that is what the angels are saying to the shepherds. Don't be afraid. I come bringing you like the biggest joy the biggest announcement you've ever heard in your life. Realize that Jesus is the source of your joy and pay attention to it. I think often we miss joy in our lives because we're distracted. We live in a distracted world. And maybe God chose to deliver this message to the shepherds because maybe they were paying attention. It says they were keeping watch at night. And I wondered sometimes, did everyone else see the angels? Like, was it just the shepherds that could see it? Or did other people in town see it and miss it? Like, what was happening? We don't know. But I miss a lot because I'm distracted. Very distracted. And I have my phone in my hand all the time. Because what one of you might need is more important than what's going on in the moment. Right? And my daughter will go, put the phone down. You're missing life. I have like less than a year left with her at home, and I'm looking at my phone. I was would you stop convicting me because I don't appreciate it. Right? We're very distracted. And maybe the shepherds got this message because they were paying more attention. And in that announcement, I'll wrap this up. In that announcement, joy led to praise. In the Old Testament, real joy came from worship. Have you ever noticed that when you worship, you find a little more joy in your life? When we're filling our lives up with good things that go into our heads? You know, we look at a lot of bad stuff. We hear a lot of bad things. We put on the radio and listen to things that, maybe aren't filling us up with praise. And so I have my phone with my playlist on it. So I sometimes will put worship music on in the car to just try to fill my life up with some good things. And that helps us eliminate the bad stuff in our lives. And then joy leads to action. Look at what the shepherds did. First, they go and they find Jesus. And I had a whole history lesson about this plan, but I'm not going to share it. But they go and they find Jesus. And then they praise God, and then they start telling everyone else about him. They run out and they tell the story to the other people around. For all of us, there are many people around us who are struggling. You might not know their story. You might not know where they are in their lives. But there are a lot of people in our lives who have pain, who can't seem to find hope, who feel alone and isolated. And we have the answer, and we're not being like the shepherds and telling anyone about it. And so I hope, and I certainly have not done my job in this area either. I hope that today we will find some joy, that we'll put our phone down, that we'll pay attention, that we will be obedient to what God has called us to, that we will work on putting away fear and picking up God,